Hi, I'm Larry Burns, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Discovering the Power of You. What we hope to accomplish during these half-hour segments is to have you meet our guests and hear their story of how they have pursued a dream, overcome difficulties in their life, and developed their own brand. And I think we're going to have some very great discussion. So as I was thinking about who should be my first guest, I thought of a number of people and I came up with Steve Jbara. Steve is a friend. I met him when I was at the Children's Foundation in Detroit. In fact, right before I left, we recruited Steve to be a trustee, and we were delighted that he was willing to join us. You're going to hear some exciting things, some fun things. And I can't think of a better person to be my first guest on this podcast, Discovering the Power of You. So, Steve Jbara, welcome.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for the nice introduction. It's good to be here.
Well,
One of my favorite
thank you.
people.
Well, thank you. And I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you doing this. And so what I thought we'd do, we want to have these discussions informal. I did Caring for Kids on radio for 6 years, and before that, the Relevant University. And those were more sort of formal interviews. You participated in that as well. And I want these to be a little bit less formal and more of a discussion and see how that goes. And so what I thought we'd do is we'd start by maybe telling our viewers, our listeners, a little bit about your background. And then we'll talk about some of the exciting things that you're involved with now.
Sure. So I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I went to school in Indiana and then kind of started my career at R.L. Polk in Southfield. And then from there, I went to Ford for about 2 years. And that's kind of where the entrepreneurial bug sort of hit me. I ended up sort of at a bar one night and ran into Joe Dumars. Ended up sort of spearheading the Detroit Pistons minor league affiliate. We ended up putting the team in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which isn't too far from the west side of the state where I grew up. And because I didn't have obviously enough money or even remotely enough money to start this team, I ended up with a lot of partners. So started the team with, actually a couple hundred partners. And but it ended up kind of working out in my favor. So when we were able to be successful with the team, a lot of these people that were, C-level people at their company or entrepreneurs or owners or whatever, they all had sort of side ideas. And so since we had success with the team, it was, hey, I'm a C-level person here. I got my day-to-day stuff, but I've always wanted to do this business. Hey, Steve, why don't you go try and spearhead this for me, or why don't you try and start this up for me? It's either this technology or this industry or whatever it was. And so from the team ended up spinning out about 7 different companies. I'd say 3 did okay. 3 didn't do that well, and 1 did really, really well. So then from there, after we had kind of finished all those rollouts, I ended up kind of spearheading a couple businesses of my own. And we can dig into that. One's a distillery,
Sure.
One's kind of a services for equity ad agency, and then we have the carbon conversion company in New York now.
That's awesome. And so let's talk a little bit about the Grand Rapids Gold.
Sure.
When I was at the Children's Foundation, we were a sponsor. We had a lot of fun with that. It was your guys were great, and it was a great partnership. And so thank you for that. And so when I first met you, you had mentioned it was with the Pistons, and that changed. Mm-hmm. And I know you searched for a new partner, and lo and behold, you found the Denver Nuggets. Mm-hmm. And what a great find that was. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened, and then the excitement of what happened last month?
Sure. Yeah. So, the league, when I started the team, was in a really weird spot. So the league was kind of the last forming minor league system for a professional sports league. So they were very slow and methodical about the way they started the league. And I think we were team number 12 of now what is actually 31 teams now.
Wow.
And so at the time, NBA teams didn't really want to own their own franchise, right? There weren't that many success stories. There wasn't that much revenue coming through, all these other things. And so as the years went on, Gatorade comes in and does this titlement sponsor. So now it's the G League. Nike gets involved, ESPN gets involved, and there's all sorts of moving pieces on the roster side that make these teams just so credible that essentially teams wanted to buy back their club because now they had a chance to make some money with it. And so we ran into that with the Pistons, who we started off with, and they ended up wanting to kind of relocate it and move it. And so we were sort of left without a dance partner for a while in Grand Rapids. And then COVID hit, and it was just this weird series of, you talk about in the intro, but there's so many ebbs and flows to kind of careers and stuff. But, essentially we go 2 years without playing a game. And the first year of those 2, we lost our affiliation. So we didn't have a lot to say for a while, but ended up, kind of writing a cold email to the Denver Nuggets, who didn't have a team at the time. They're such a large organization with Kroenke Sports, where they have, from Arsenal to the Los Angeles Rams to the Avalanche, the Nuggets, on and on and on, that they don't really operate that much in kind of the minor league space. And so it was nice. It was a great partnership. Shockingly, Grand Rapids has 2 direct flights a day to Denver. And so it ended up being this really incredible partnership. And so this was our second year with them. And, the first time I've been able to ride the coattails into the NBA finals and ultimately win the NBA championship. So being there for that and, getting sprayed with champagne, all of a sudden before I know it, I got goggles on and everybody's soaking everybody. I mean, it was just a once in a lifetime experience. So it's been really fun. I'm really looking forward to next year. I think, all the buzz off of that's really going to help us in Grand Rapids.
That's awesome. So that picture of you in the locker room is awesome. So that had to be a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so unique.
Yeah. So you need to know, I live in Stuart, Florida now, and I was given one of the gold uniforms that the Children's Foundation sponsored and the team wore. So when I walk our dogs, I'm wearing that uniform. So I'm bringing the Grand Rapids gold to Stuart, Florida.
We were wondering why all the website hits were coming out of Stuart, Florida, and now we know we got an ambassador down there.
Right, absolutely. So you mentioned a couple of other companies. One of the unique companies that you've told me about is this ad agency that you have, and it's sort of based on a unique formula. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So I mentioned, we had rolled out a few different businesses from the team, and one of them we did really well on, and we had a really, really nice exit. And now I had some cash and was able to, what I wanted to do is reinvest into entrepreneurs and companies and things like that, because I had gotten so much help when I first started. I didn't know how to do half the things it took to put a business together. I was leaning on investors and mentors and everything like that. And so I wanted to kind of contribute and be in the space. Well, my goodness, I was doing such a bad job of picking out companies and picking out entrepreneurs. Everything I touched seemed to just turn to dirt. If I couldn't be involved with it, or I couldn't, really be hands-on with it, which is what I sort of wanted to do. And so then I just kind of thought, there's got to be another way to invest into companies without giving them cash, because what I was going through was, say entrepreneur so-and-so, here's $100,000 for, call it 10% of your company. Right. And as they got $100,000, they decided they needed a new office, they needed a new truck, and they needed this and that. And, essentially at the end of the day, my money was exhausted and we were no further to growing the business. And I was going into really, really early stage companies. And so I met a guy that was running kind of a boutique agency, and we thought up a plan to kind of turn it into a services for equity business. So instead of giving an entrepreneur $100,000, like we mentioned, for 10% of the company, we'll give you, $150,000 of advertising resources in exchange for 10% of the company. And that way we know exactly where the money's going. We know exactly what it's headed to, because a lot of these early stage companies, they have maybe 2 clients, right? And they just started paying themselves, and maybe they're just about to hire somebody, but they can't spend in advertising because the margins are so thin that they lose one of those clients, that either there goes their paycheck or there goes their employee. But that's typically the moment in which they really, really need to spend. And so we've had a lot of success of leaning in on businesses at that stage, providing advertising resources, whether it's, early stage, logo design and package design, to digital spends, to social media, whatever it happens to be. And then, the goal there is, once that fund is exhausted, we call it the 150 we invested. If you aren't in a spot to pay us, then we really haven't done our job. So you should have revenue, you should have sales, you should have, everything that goes along with it in order to be a paid client. And then the model there gets really cool. And we've had some pretty good success with it, where we've invested in a company, and now the money's exhausted, and now they're a paid client. So moving forward, we can obviously pay down what we lent, but also, once that gets paid, now we have a paid client that also we own a piece of. And so it's become a really, really cool model. We've gotten, pretty successful. We had a lot of companies go kind of all the way through and transition through to being a paid client. But it was an easier, safer way for me to kind of invest in businesses, so that we had a little bit more control of where the money was going.
Excellent. Yeah, very unique. That's very cool. So I'm holding in my hand a sanitizer from a company called Airco.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your company.
Yeah.
But the sanitizer business isn't really what you do, right?
No. So
tell us about that. I try to explain it to my friends, because you're my buddy, and I want to brag about you. And I have a hard time explaining what they do. So you'll do a much better job at it.
Yeah. It is. It's complicated, and it's something that I've never been involved with before in the past. And essentially what happened is, I met two fellas, and they were starting this business, kind of based off of this Dr. Stafford Sheehan's his invention. So essentially what he had come up with was this catalyst. And for you and I that are not science guys, I don't know what that means. But essentially it's his combination of minerals, metals, elements. I've been in the business for 5 years. I still don't fully understand it. But when his catalyst is exposed to carbon dioxide and blended with hydrogen in this kind of pressurized form, it causes this reaction that creates a liquid methanol ethanol. And so we take the byproduct and we can turn it into, like you said, alcohol-based products, where we have sanitizer and fragrant, and obviously our favorite, vodka. And then on the methanol side, we're able to add the paraffins and create a jet fuel. And so we get carbon sent to us from companies that are doing carbon capture, which is a really hot button right now. But a lot of companies don't know what to do next after you've, captured carbon, because there's a lot of tax credits and things that go along with it. So we're kind of the downstream option for people that are doing carbon capture to, turn it into usable products.
Excellent. And that's based in New York, correct?
Based in New York. Yeah, we got 2 factories out there. And, again, this is my favorite way to explain it, but essentially, 1/5 of what we create, a bottle of booze, call it, brings in more, CO2 out of the atmosphere than 8 trees. And so that's an easy way to, in my head, still to quantitate, kind of what we're doing here. But it's been a really, really cool business, and it's nice being on that side of things, where we're actually doing something to help benefit some of this climate change, and you could turn it into usable products at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. So I worked at a medical school for 16 years and was around scientists all the time. And I truly did not understand 3/4 of what they said. So I know that you're smarter than me, so you probably understand a lot more. But I'm fascinated by these scientists, men and women. And it sounds like you got a great partnership with them.
Yeah, it's been cool. And again, I don't fully understand it or comprehend it sometimes, but it's cool when you have a product that comes out of it that you can say, like, hey, all right, now I get it. We entered this, and this into a machine, and this came out of it. And
you sent me a bottle of vodka, and that went, I got to tell you, that went pretty fast. So it's
well, thank you for helping save the earth.
Right, exactly. So we've talked about the Grand Rapids Gold. We've talked about your ad agency. We've talked about Airco. Now let's talk about your journey as it relates to resilience and being an entrepreneur and mentors. And And so if somebody's watching this that, has some ideas, but really hasn't had the reason to move forward or the gumption to move forward, what kind of advice can you give somebody that has some failures, and what thoughts do you have about that?
Sure. I think making that leap is really challenging, right? And even when I went to start the basketball team, I had a great job at Ford, and I loved my life in Detroit, and everything was very kind of normal and cruising. I guess at the end of the day, when I thought about it, I said, look, you can give this thing a shot. You can always come back. And I think part of that is being, good enough to the company you work for or the people you work with to, leave a reputation everywhere you go, frankly, but especially when you're about to make the leap of, if this doesn't go good, hopefully they want you back. But at the end of the day, that's what it takes, is that leap. You got to trust in yourself. When I started the team, look, nobody would give me any money. This doesn't scream basketball investment by any means. And so, I had so many investors because nobody would really write a big check. And I knocked on most, if not every door in Grand Rapids, trying to find people that would invest in this idea and this notion. And again, nobody would give cash. It was always, if you do happen to hit, $4 million in investment, sure, I'll write you a check for 30 grand. I'll write you a check for 10 grand or whatever. But got told no, an awful lot. And, part of it helps make you stronger. Part of it helps your pitch. And part of it helps, really dive in. And if you can brush off, a couple dozen no's, I mean, then you have kind of the fortitude to push through and really make something happen. I think it's a good sign that you believe in what you're about to do or what you want to do. Because if no's start to affect you, then it might not be the right thing for you to do. So, a lot of people say it, but I think, again, no is just a word. And if you can push past it, I think you got a bright future in that standpoint.
Well, in everything we do, there's no's. I'm 67 years old, and I'm sort of reinventing myself with the proper group. And people don't return my phone calls like they did when I was CEO of the Children's Foundation all the time. And so you just got to be resilient, and you're a great example of that. And so building up that resilience is something that's really critical in what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Do you agree with all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think resilience is so key. You gotta be able to create your own momentum at times, and you gotta be able to, stand on your own 2 feet and kind of push forward. And at the end of the day, I think it's so much reputational. Like if you're a good person, and we've talked about this before, Larry, we hire off of, I think a lot of companies kind of call it different things, but essentially the airport rule, right? So if you and I were traveling, right, and it's Christmas Eve and we want to get back, we've been delayed 3 times. We got to now connect, to Houston to get back to Detroit or whatever it is. We ran to the gate, we're sweating, we're carrying our bags, and they just said, hey, sorry, your flight's delayed for 3 hours. Are you somebody that I could stand with at the airport the next 3 hours? Or am I going to try and run away the first second I can, and I'll come back and meet you at the gate? And that's something that, I don't think can be taught. It's kind of learned. It's kind of within you. But so much of entrepreneurialism and what you talked about, resilience, is just being a good person and really being able to, have people enjoy being around you. Because that's a waterfall effect. If you can be somebody that's, exciting to be around, fun to be around, kindness, all those things, I mean, waterfall will happen, and people will want to connect with you. People want to lean in on what you're doing. I think it just goes so far.
Yeah, well, you certainly fall into those categories. And it's one of the reasons I was so happy that you agreed to be a trustee of the Children's Foundation. And it's also one of the reasons that I invested the Children's Foundation marketing money into the Grand Rapids goal because of you. It was because of you.
Sure.
And then the more I found out about the team and all of that, it just made it a better decision. But the decision was based on Steve Jbara. So, what you're saying is so true. And how about mentors? Do they play a role in this process along the way for people?
Huge. And I think not being afraid to lean on people Because again, if you go back to the thing about being likable, being somebody that people want to work with, being somebody that people want to cheer for, then there's no limit to the amount of people that want to help out, right? Everybody wants to see people be successful, especially if they've invested money and things like that into you. But so much of that just goes back to, just being somebody people want to be around, being somebody that can prove that, if invested in, you're going to work your tail off to get them, a return and things like that. So I leaned on a ton of people. When I started, I didn't know how to put a investment deck together. I didn't know any of the legal documents that go into starting businesses. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But again, back to I think I present myself as somebody people want to be around and people want to help. It goes a really, really long way. So I think, leaning on people that have been there before is so critical, because you can save yourself from making a ton of mistakes that somebody else has made in the past.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things that I hope this podcast does is also provide some guidance for people and advice, which you've given a lot of. Is there any other advice that you think would be very important for people? I called this podcast The Power of You because when I was in higher education, I had it was at the University of Toledo primarily, a lot of first generation college students who barely made it into college, who didn't come from the best backgrounds, and they didn't have a lot of confidence in themselves. And so, I always presented that you can't control from where you come from, but you can control your brand, how you're perceived. If you want to be perceived as the guy that wears your baseball hat backwards and your pants falling down, well, then go for it. But you have control over that. And I think some of the things you've talked about, being nice, being reliable, is in the same ballpark as that. Is there any other key advice that you'd like to give to our audience?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think presentation is really, really key. And I think, I could go on a soapbox here, but we're hiring a lot of people. We got 100 in New York. I got, over 100 here in Michigan. We're hiring all the time, and it's getting more and more and more difficult to find people that check that box of being somebody that you would want to represent your company. And I don't know what the wave is. I don't know what's going on, but it's been really, really hard. And so, I think there's a couple things from a student standpoint that I always recommend. It's pay attention in accounting. That can take you so far if you can just speak educatedly to financial terms and the way the business functions, things like that. The other one that's becoming a lost tactic, I think, is twofold, but being able to write and being able to speak. So much business, even now, is being done, emails, LinkedIn, whatever, and typos and things that come out now are astounding. And it's just, I don't know where we've lost that, but that's because, again, all my companies, there's a good chance if you work for me and you meet with somebody, you're the first contact they've had with our business. And I need people that can represent that brand accordingly and be somebody that we're proud to send out. And in the same standpoint, it's the speech thing, right? Learning how to talk, learning how to communicate, learning how to make eye contact. Those things are available in college if you push yourself, but it's, I don't know if people are opting out more than not lately, but it's an interesting hiring world. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that this past year you were part of the 40 under 40 in Grand Rapids. Congratulations to that.
Thank you.
And so what lies ahead for Steve Jbara in the foreseeable future?
Well, now that we got an NBA championship, I really want a G League championship.
Right.
Hopefully next time we're on this call, I got a ring so big that,
Right.
It'll be reflecting. We'll have problems. So that's fun. I've never been so excited for a next season with the team. A lot of momentum coming from Denver. Also, we just seem to really hit our stride in Grand Rapids, new building. So that's exciting. I think the agency is going to take a step forward this year. And then, everything that's going on at Air Company is really, really exciting. We're building a new factory in Niagara. It'll run off the hydro energy on the falls. We'll be kind of creating just jet fuel out of there. And there's just a lot of momentum coming from a lot of different angles. So it's exciting stuff. I'm going to try not to start anything else or or dive into too much else. I got enough on my plate right now. So hopefully next time we talk, I'll have one less thing to worry about.
Right. Well, good luck with that. I know you. So, well, Steve Jbara, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for all you do for the community, which is a lot. I was at the foundation for 6 years. I asked you for a lot. You never said no, not once. So thank you. This is our inaugural episode, and I can't think of a better guest. So thank you. You're certainly the power of you. So thanks,
Steve. LB. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All righty. See you, man.